What's the most bizarre thing you've ever seen in someone else's home that made you question your friendship? Had a friend in high school that was a notorious stoner. Constantly smelled like pot. He would also look up all kinds of information on hydroponics equipment and grow lights on the school computers. Whenever we asked him about it, he would always say, "It's for my tomatoes, man." Sure, it's totally for your tomatoes, guy. Yup, can confirm. Growing weed earlier in life is what got me into gardening and growing fruit and veg for fun. I stopped growing weed a long time ago, but it taught me so much about plants and caring for them and how to manipulate them. I've grown amazing bonsai trees and manipulated my tomatoes and cucumbers and other fruit/veg to get maximum yields with very nice quality. I've done them using hydro, soil, and in between. I've experimented with different plant foods, made my own, learnt the science behind what a plant actually needs and how to provide the best environments to make them thrive. It's also quite relaxing at times and stressful at others. I learn everything from pH to humidity to CO2 levels to light intensity, etc. There's so much to it. Even the internal working of a plant and how to get maximum uptake and how to promote different types of growth depending on overall goals. Spot signs of illness and how to remedy them. There's so much to it. Very interesting to me. Friend of mine ended up in the hospital and he called me panicking because his parents were on the way to come take care of him for a few weeks until he was back on his feet and he needed me to swing by his house and clean up before they got there. He was crying and hyperventilating, begging me to not judge him and to not tell anyone about what I would find. He refused to tell me what he needed cleaned up. So I ended up getting there a few hours before they arrived and I walked into the living room and set up on a folding table was the largest collection of anal toys I had ever seen lined up in neat rows with rags and cleaning solution on the table. Needless to say, I laughed so hard I tweaked my back. It was the last thing I would have imagined him being into. Needless to say, I used his kitchen tongs to pick everything up and throw them into bags and hid it all away. I still take every opportunity to slip in a few but jokes whenever we are alone, but he refuses to even acknowledge them or that day even happened. I was friends with these beautiful popular girls who always looked so well presented. They were wealthy and I was surprised the first time I went to their house. It wasn't a gross, but there was clothes and makeup, nail polish stains everywhere, just completely no organization. Like all their clothes were just mountains of clothes. Their phones and laptops were covered in makeup. Their carpet was all stained in makeup. Bathroom covered in makeup. And a lot of stuff in their house was broken. They had an alcoholic dad who'd get drunk and break stuff like the railing on the steps, their glass top stove, the coffee table was missing the glass. I was also friends with another rich girl who lived in a mansion, her mom was even an actress, and we always had to stay downstairs. The downstairs was tidy and very presentable, but one day we went upstairs and it was filthy and dirty. Like dusty and unclean and kinda like a somewhat hoarder situation upstairs, but the downstairs was so pretty. Hubby and I moved into a new home in Florida years ago. The next door neighbor was a recluse, no one saw her ever. Our first Thanksgiving I decided to see what the deal was with her, so I loaded up a basket of homemade blueberry muffins and knocked on her door. She was a sweet old lady of 90. Warmly thanked me and invited me in. Her house was dark, neat, quiet, until I walked down the hall. She was giving me a tour, and in one side room there was a large computer and 6 huge monitors, all running. Turns out she was a computer programming genius. She traded stocks from all over the world and closely monitored overseas markets. It was wild. I stayed for tea and found out she had graduated from UCLA back in the 60s as one of the first female programmers. She was so incredibly smart. I also discovered she knew our Wi-Fi password and advised me to make it stronger and change it from time to time. She died 4 years later, but I will never forget Jackie. My mother-in-law just recently passed at age 96. She was a wise and intelligent woman, a retired teacher with a quick and inquisitive mind. She was sharp as a tack till well into her 90s. She lost most of her hearing in her last months and began to drift a bit mentally because of it. But she showed me that learning is lifelong, intellectual curiosity keeps you young, and as long as you keep your body healthy, your mind can keep you in a very good place. I'm sorry about your mother's dementia. Alzheimer's got my father-in-law, a tremendous intellect wiped away by a terrible disorder. His last years were fairly peaceful, but it was hard to see him lose his memories and his ability to manage his own life. The good thing was that he never lost himself, the essence of his personality. He was a kind and gracious person to the very end, even if he didn't really know what was going on around him. He was still him even if he didn't remember who that was. I hope your mother's decline is as kind to her. When we bought our first house many years ago, I do remember the smell was pretty bad when we looked at the house, but real estate agent let us know that the lady who owned the house was in some trouble. Financial issues as well as trouble with local dog control people, as she had a big German Shepherd dog she kept indoors. We brought the place pretty much on the spot, as significantly cheaper than other places we were looking for, and got keys about a month later at 5 p.m. on a Friday after all the legal stuff. Moved in, and I remember thinking the carpet was some weird gray felt style stuff that stunk of urine and dog poo. Also found most of the light bulbs were blown. Got up on the Saturday morning, and when we took a closer look, found the carpet was not felt style, it was just so thickly matted with long dog hair. And fleas, along with poo smeared into the tufts. Spent the day ripping up the carpet in the corridor and worst rooms where the dog had been locked up. My wife and I did more deep cleaning that weekend than ever done before or afterwards. Entire house smelt like bleach and flea powder for a while. Actually still feel a little bad for the lady who owned the house. We met her sister when she came to pick up some mail and she said her sister was really a lovely person, but after losing her job, getting into trouble and having to sell the house quickly, entire place went bad. And that the sister didn't own a ladder to replace bulbs and her vacuum cleaner had stopped working a year or two earlier. I used to work with this super friendly guy that had a great work ethic. We were both smokers and we used to enjoy talking during our smoke breaks. We became work buddies and after a few months I suspected that he was developing some romantic feelings for me. He was very good looking and I was attracted to him. One day he invited me over for dinner and I accepted. His apartment was pristine and the food that he had prepared was delicious. After dinner we both discussed our recent divorces and he began telling me about his ex-wife that he had caught being unfaithful. I felt terrible for the guy. He had moved to another state to support his ex's career trajectory and she ended up having an affair with her supervisor. This is where it gets weird. He said he wanted to show me something and he went to his room and returned with a box. I started to feel nervous. He opened the box and it was filled with very neatly folded lingerie. His ex's lingerie. He began by showing me each piece and he explained the history of each piece of lingerie. I thought, WTF does this have to do with me? Is he going to try to get me to wear this? I need to get the hell out of here immediately. At this point I began experiencing freeze mode and started to look around for the quickest exit. The last piece that he showed me was the one that she wore the night that he caught her with her affair partner. In the back of my mind I wondered, how the fuck did he end up with that? If she was wearing it when he caught them, did he break into wherever she was after that and steal it? I felt my skin crawl. I told him that I hadn't realized the time and that I needed to head home because I only had my sitter until 10. His face kinda fell a little bit and he began to walk me out to my car. I was slightly relieved but still very, very nervous. Once we reached my car, he came in for a hug and then proceeded to give me an open-mouthed kiss. I was really scared because the parking lot was empty and if I upset him he might not react well, so I quickly kissed him back and then jumped into my car and hit the lock. I smiled and nodded at him as I drove the fuck away. And that's what gave me the motivation to quit smoking cold turkey. He did ask me out again a few times, but I had picked up a second job and it was a good excuse for declining. Thankfully he was transferred to a different office a few months later. He was so fucking creepy. ETA, during this time period I didn't have a washer/dryer and I had to use a laundromat. This guy knew this and on our first day back to work after our date he offered to do my laundry. Not have me come over and use his washer/dryer but to do it himself. JFC, can you even imagine? The state of their home. In high school I had a friend the same year as me who lived with her dad. Freshman year the interior of the house was okay, the furniture was dated and shabby but clean enough. By senior year posts were falling out of the banister, all the carpet was threadbare and fraying. All the wood surfaces were dry, cracked and dull. Bathrooms were functional but neglected. There was also a constant smell that I later learned was mildew. My friend's bedroom, on the hand, was the only clean bright space in the house. Plush carpet always freshly vacuumed, beautiful bed and quilt with matching plush pillows, everything on her shelves was tidy, dust-free, and in their place, immaculate and organized. I always thought she was quirky for being so particular about the smallest things. Whenever we hung out she had to have everything a certain way. It all makes sense now thinking about it. That house was miserable and she did her best to carve out a space for herself in there. After graduation she still stayed in that house, but I hope she's moved out by now. I also learned later on that her father was a functioning alcoholic, hence the deterioration of the house. I think my friend stayed in that home because she was worried about him. I don't judge her for living there or the state of the house, but it does make me feel sad that she grew up in such conditions. I think she was incredibly resilient to have been able to build a beautiful room for herself at such a young age in spite of the state of the rest of the house. She a very strong person and I hope she knows that. Oh, I had one of those experiences. Driving through the Yukon and I had to go to the bathroom. Nothing in sight and 20 minutes earlier had a large cougar at the nose of my car growling at me. This is desolate area, the kind of place where you fill up at every gas station you see and bring along extra gas cans to boot. The kind of place where someone could kill you on the side of the road and you wouldn't be found for days. So I'm losing it. Have to use the bathroom. We come upon a now closed gas station, as in closed down a good 10 years ago, but there's a house there and a light on, so I go knock. Guy answers and I tell him my issue. He says no, I definitely cannot because it is much too dirty to use. I think he's being polite about a little mess and insist I'll take my chances over being mauled by a large cat. He finally caves. I take one step into this small bathroom and there is shit literally everywhere. Like the guy hadn't bought toilet paper in 20 years kind of shit, not a spot where shit wasn't. I felt horrible that I pushed the issue when he clearly warned me and didn't want to embarrass him, so I shut the door for 20 seconds, gagging the whole time, which made things worse. I come out and noticeably catch my breath. Tell him thanks and run out. Get to car and am huffing the air. Passenger is like WTF? Explain it to him and he's dying. Proceed on down the road a mile and I hop out and go. Then I shit you not, less than a mile from there is a goddamn restaurant, bar and gas station. Fuming. We go in. I tell them about my encounter BC. I'm actually concerned for the guy at this point. They say, oh, I see you met Hank. They were all very familiar with him. Guy was a millionaire in the early 2000s. Had kids in Cali that had been begging him to move in with them, also millionaires, and he absolutely refused to lead his shit bathroom life. Absolutely mind-boggling. My friend's naked mom. In 6th grade, late 1980s, I had this friend at school, Jeremy. Jeremy lived with his grandparents, and when I asked why, one time he said his dad left and his mom was sick. One time, Jeremy invited me over to his house to watch some shows or play Nintendo, just to hang out. My mom had met Jeremy a few times and he'd been to our house, and she knew his grandmother, so she said okay. Walked over there after school and Jeremy casually lets drop, "Hey, my mom just got back last week so you can meet her too." His mom was laying in bed completely naked when we showed up. Jeremy acted like it was the most normal thing in the world. She goes, "What are you guys gonna do? Hang out?" Jeremy says we're gonna watch some movies on the TV in his grandfather's den, where the Nintendo was hooked up. At this point, I'd never seen a fully naked adult woman in person and I was just staring like an idiot. She noticed and I saw her wink at me and blow me a kiss while she was smoking. She asked what we were going to watch and asked if we wanted to watch a porno. Jeremy asked me super casually and I said yeah, sure. We got some snacks and went into the other room and she was there, still naked, still smoking. She'd loaded up the movie in the VCR and she goes, "You can't tell anybody about this, okay? Or I have to leave again." I didn't know what she was talking about at the time, but I agreed because I wanted to see the porno movie. I'd never seen one. This was way before internet access was common. So she starts it and she's laying on the couch behind us, legs open, smoking a cigarette. We're like 5 minutes into the movie and I've got the biggest boner I've ever had. I honestly don't think I'd ever even managed to jerk off at this point yet. I had no idea how to do that or what to do. She goes, "If it's hard, honey, you can take it out. It'll feel better." I didn't know what she meant and I saw Jeremy take his dick out. He does "Thanks, Mom," and then kinda realized that this felt weird. It didn't feel bad, necessarily, but I just didn't get what was going on really. The garage door opener sounded and Jeremy jumped up and put his dick away. His mom leapt up and turned off the movie and ejected it. She scuttled back to her room. Jeremy said, "That's my grandma, so we can't watch it now," and I said, okay. We played Excitebike for an hour or so until my mom came to get me after she got off work. I never said anything about it to anybody and I honestly haven't thought of it maybe a handful of times in the last 35 years. I mentioned it to an ex-girlfriend once who said, "Dude, you were almost abused," and I laughed and then she said, "Seriously, you don't realize that?" And I stopped and thought about it, and that was the first time that I had actually realized what was going on, probably 20 years later.